Welcome back to the exam preparation video series for AZ-700, Designing and Implementing Microsoft Azure Networking Solutions. I am Karl de Winter, a Microsoft Technical Trainer, and this is the fourth episode out of a total of 5 episodes in this series. In this episode, we will focus on designing and implementing private access to Azure services, and we will cover how to design and implement Azure Private Link services, Azure Private Endpoints, and Service Endpoints. Here is a list of all the different skills you may be tested on. They are sometimes referred to as may include, meaning they may or may not be on your exam. This list isn't exhaustive, and while we won't be covering every skill in this video, be sure you're able to perform these skills before taking the exam. Now, Private Endpoint is the key technology behind Private Link. Private Endpoint is a network interface that enables a private and secure connection between your virtual network and an Azure service. Now, Private Endpoint is the network interface that replaces the resource's public endpoint. A private endpoint is mapped to only your specific instance of a PaaS service. So make sure you understand the properties before creating a private endpoint. Remind the steps to create private endpoints. You should create a virtual network first and select which resource you would like to connect to using the private endpoint. A private endpoint is mapped to only a specific instance of a PaaS service. For example, you might have a private endpoint for SQL Server, and Private Link provides secure access to this SQL Server by replacing a resource public endpoint with a private network interface. Now, Private Endpoint uses a private IP address from the VNet to bring the service into your VNet. You can use the Private Link service to bridge an internal private application to a remote customer who also resides on Azure. And when using a Private Link service, the service or resource must be deployed behind an Azure standard load balancer. The consumers of the service can then attach a Private Link service using either the specific resource ID or a chosen alias. Now, the provider is then able to approve or deny the attachment request. Now, keep this workflow in mind while planning an Azure Private Link service. Configuring an Azure Standard Load Balancer and a Private Link service is in the service provider tenant, and creating a private endpoint in the service consumer tenant. Remind yourself that the illustration on the screen shows a typical high-level architecture for enterprise environments with central DNS resolution, where name resolution for Private Link resources is done via Azure Private DNS. Make sure you understand the concept of DNS integration for Private Link for the exam, because it's really important. You can access your workloads in Azure through private endpoints from on-premises private peering over ExpressRoute or VPN. You do not need to set up public peering or use the internet to connect to your workloads. Another option for changing the default network connectivity to shared PaaS services outside of the virtual network is service endpoints. Now, service endpoints are configurable at the subnet level inside an Azure Virtual Network, and they are available for a wide, but not complete range of Azure PaaS services. And this is really easy to confuse with private endpoints, but with service endpoints, you want to secure Azure resources to services deployed directly into virtual networks. You can create service endpoints with the 4 key steps illustrated on the screen. This example addresses storage service endpoints, which is similar to creating compute and SQL service endpoints. By enabling service endpoints, you have changed the default behavior of PaaS services by blocking all access unless it comes from a specified subnet. Service endpoint policies are an additional tuning parameter that can extend the network protection of service endpoints to include data exfiltration scenarios from your virtual network. And they are only available for Azure Storage. Now you can create a service endpoint policy and associate it to a subnet in a virtual network. Service endpoints can only be used by endpoints within your Azure Virtual Network, and traffic must be sourced from a client within the Azure network. You can create an outbound security rule with the any protocol and the allow action. To recap, in this episode, we discussed how to design and implement Azure Private Link Service, Azure Private Endpoints, and Service Endpoints. Remember that this group accounts for 10 to 15% of the exam, so keep that in mind when preparing for the exam. Thank you for watching the AZ-700 Designing and Implementing Microsoft Azure Networking Solutions exam prep video series. We hope that this series helped you understand the skills that you're strong in and areas where you might need to revisit. Remember that understanding these concepts is crucial for your success, and be sure to leverage other exam prep resources such as the study guide, practice assignments, and exam sandboxes.